Welcome to 5 Lent, Tell Me More. This week we're concentrating on John's Gospel, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. It's the story of the raising of Lazarus, even though the raising of Lazarus only takes up the last 2 verses. Most of this story is the dialogue that happens between Martha and Mary and Jesus, but in a Johannine fashion, that is a very rich conversation that we can glean quite a bit of information from. I want to start off by talking about John as a whole. Its gospel is divided into 2 basic parts. There's chapters 1 through 12 that talks about signs, and then chapters 13 through 20 are about glory or glorification. 21 is a prologue in which Jesus and Peter have their encounter around the charcoal fire. But today we're talking about the raising of Lazarus. This scene of the raising of Lazarus for John is going to be the impetus for the Jews to have Jesus arrested and crucified. For the Synoptic Gospels, that's going to be the turning over of the table on the Temple Mount. But for John, that's happened back in chapter 2, so that's not even a factor at this point. It may have upset the Jewish leadership, but not enough for them to act on it. It's not until they get to this final sign in John, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, that they start to see that Jesus' power is just out of control. There's no controlling Jesus at this point. And they need to do something. And so if we continue on with your reading, which I would encourage you to do in early chapter 12, you're going to see the Sanhedrin get together with our friend Nicodemus, which we've talked about much earlier in Lent. The encounter with Jesus and Nicodemus at night. The same Nicodemus is going to defend Jesus and not recommend that he be killed. And of course, the Sanhedrin is going to say that Jesus, because of this act of Lazarus, that Jesus needs to be taken out, the one person dying for the many, or for the sake of Judaism as a whole, is what they're going to put forward as their reason for arresting Jesus and killing him. But this one sign from Jesus is the greatest sign that he's done, and it really does kind of put a peg in who Jesus is. He is who's John, who has said from the very beginning that he's the Word of God. He is God, and this final sign can only be done by God, the resurrection of the body. And in John, that's the way it's seen, as the final act of showing the people who Jesus is plainly by action, and that is he raises Lazarus from the dead. And in the course of his context with Mary, if you remember in previous sermons, I had mentioned the great I am statements. I am referring back to Moses in that burning bush. He's going to tell Mary, I am the resurrection and the life. I am God. I am God. I am God, and I am God can do these things as he sees fit to do for his glorification. Now, Jesus is going to say that this raising of Lazarus is for the glorification of his Father, of God his Father, that his glorification is going to come a little later on the cross, and then the resurrection and ascension, which for John are the big events. It's not the crucifixion, which we all like to think is the big event, but truthfully, the miracle comes in the resurrection and the ascension. There's lots of people that are being crucified. It's pretty easy to kill the body, although we didn't kill Jesus because, well, Jesus is God. Jesus handed over his life after 6 short hours. And if you are familiar with crucifixion, 6 hours is not very long to hang on the cross. But I digress. Lazarus, we didn't understand at the first of this, because the first time John has mentioned Lazarus, we didn't understand fully the relationship between Jesus and Lazarus. But by the time we get to the resurrection, which is those last two verses, we understand that Lazarus was a friend, and his death was so meaningful that we get that shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, and so we see that Jesus' intention was not for Lazarus to die. Jesus didn't intend for Lazarus to die, but because of Lazarus' death, God chose to use it for his glorification. And I hope that answers a few more questions for you for this long passage. I was excited that we got to read 1 through 45. I know it was a very long reading, a long time to stand, but I'm sure that as you start to look at this more closely, you'll see just how meaningful this whole John passage is, and how it plays right into this next week we're going into, which is Holy Week, where we'll make our triumphant entry, and we'll reenact the arrest of Jesus. We'll strip the altar in the sign that we've laid Jesus in the grave, and we'll take Jesus in the form of body and blood over to the altar of repose, where he will, in essence, leave the building, our worship space for a short period of time until Saturday, which is when we will celebrate his resurrection, and the hallelujahs will come back at the end of the service. So I invite you to be part of that and to be part of that journey, and know that this story of Lazarus plays a key role in connecting Lazarus' resurrection to Jesus' resurrection. All right, I'm available if you have any questions. Please email me, mhurst@redeemersarasota.org if you have more questions, or catch me in the hallway and we'll talk about it. Thanks. God bless.